Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest video. There is no epic loot here, only puns, taken from the website ReUpload. The link to the story will be down below. If you wish to support the author, please head over there and give them support. If you wish to support the channel, there are numerous ways to do so down below. There is Discord, merch, Patreon, bunch of other stuff too, so have a look in the description, you might be surprised. Anyways, now on to the fiction. As always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 158. Sour on the Rocks.
Pay? Give dungeon scum my money to put up a damn hill.
One of the Fairplay men snarled in outrage as he read the sign above the oddly placed well. Inside, weird, clamping noises could be heard. New thought that if everyone in the dungeon was scum, then these people were clearly the flotsam that did nothing for anyone. At least pond scum produced oxygen for others. These fools just opened their mouths and tainted everyone else's lives with their opinions. As if hearing them, the well surface formed on a layer of brick, shutting off any potential way to drop coinage into the well. A sign appeared above it. Mercy given, mercy offered. Cruelty inflicted, cruelty returned. Breaking into this well might get you treasure, but it no longer allows you to skip this room. Gaston sweated as his skin peeled in places from the mass heat from the infernal mushroom grove behind them.
We proceed with caution,
he insisted, and put a foot on the hill leading up. An arrow sliced through his cheek, leaving a stinging, bleeding line.
No kinslayer shall be granted passage,
came a dark, angry voice. Gaston, leader of the squadron of all the Fairplayer operatives in the area, looked up to see a goblin of all things getting the drop on them.
You dare,
he began to hiss, raising his hand for his exhausted mages and bowmen running out of arrows to take aim. A boot slammed into his face, thrown with such force his nose burst open and spurt of crimson blood. When his vision cleared, leaving a horrible pain on his face, he saw a second goblin looking down at them. The thing was nimble, moving between two of the ramparts, with only one boot on, and dancing like a feral cat.
Break my heart and I'll break your skull, forswear!
The muscular newcomer raged. Gayton reached into his pocket for a special vial, a deadly neurotoxin that worked well on things with brains. Fairplay all had antidotes, but these goblins would be left twitching on the floor, spasming in agony as Gaston slit their... A hand gripped his wrist before Gaston could toss the vial.
Such behavior is ungentlemanly.
I will commandeer this, said the massive, walking mushroom with a bushy moustache made of creamy fibers.
Where did you come from?
Gaston gasped as the grip of the wrist was like steel.
Oh, I came just to appear where the winds take me, where people lack manners and respect. Lord Mushy will arrive to deliver due justice. Such is the power of the gentleman,
the creature said smoothly.
Sir, it's a wandering raid, boss. The mana signature matches that level of power.
One of the majors screamed.
Impossible. This dungeon is supposed to have barely any flaws. It's nothing. It's a joke. It cannot have such a thing.
Gayton screamed as the mushroom lifted him off the ground with ease. I may take insults to myself, the destruction of my home. Even I may one day forgive you for the murder of my friend. The self-proclaimed Lord Mushy began before his once-soft eyes began to glow an ominous yellow, leaving trails of hazy heat behind as they moved. But never call mother nothing in my presence again, or this'll be much worse. He promised, and Gayton didn't comprehend what happened next, only that his ribs made an odd noise, and he was flying. He crashed into a warm room of wood and carpet. The scent of cooking meat and ale was strong in the air. Gayton landed, rolling across the room where he gasped, trying to stand. Something cold and metallic was softly placed on his forehead. Gayton looked up to see a hideous goblin with tumors across its torso and thick lips. In its hands was a fire crystal-powered gun. The long barrel looked to be made for enough force to be built up that Gayton would have his head blown clean off if he moved wrong.
I've heard that you have a habit of saying dumb things, huh? I wonder. Does that still hold true?
The grotesque goblin asked softly, his voice smirky and much gruffer than the other goblins. Gayton narrowed his eyes, opening his mouth to spit on the goblin's face when he barely swallowed back the urge. Good boy.
I might not make terrible stew out of your remains. Darwin soup would be a limited-time dish, the goblin said with a wicked grin. What do you want? What do you want? He asked, as the rest of his team was carried in by the powerful mushroom creature, the sight of it making his chest ache something horrible. Now you talk, now you ask. Where was this when you murdered Francois in cold blood? The hulking goblin hissed. You cannot murder that without a soul. How can it be murdered if it simply returns afresh after a night's sleep? That is monstrous, nothing more, Gaten replied coldly. Oh, full name. Swa is going to be so annoyed, said the muscular goblin. I thought he was just Swa, the dark hooded goblin with crimson eyes and bow on his back mused. Fran and Swa shared the name. They're both at heart Francois. But I think that they're Fran and Swa in their own minds, the other goblin said brightly. What madness was this? What sick charade was this dungeon putting on for him, like a demonic child showing off their dolls? What I want is an apology, the large goblin said, and it jiggled oddly, like an odd interpretation of a voluptuous barmaid. Its voice wasn't bad, but Gaston scowled harder, ignoring the figure. Might not take my hand, or kill me? He asked acidly. The apology will hurt more, the goblin said sweetly. I would rather die. Gaten stressed through his teeth, chin jutting out. Then you shall wish you died, she said simply. She. When did it transition from an it to a her in Gaten's mind? The goblin went around the bar, leaving Gaten at the mercy of the mushroom monster. She returned shortly with a bubbling cup of something. The liquid was nearly black and the air around it hummed dangerously, as the few sizzling fizzes that escaped left hazy puffs of smoke in the shapes of skulls as it rose into the air. What is that? Gaten shrank back, but he was against the wall now. It was troll soup, the goblin maid said casually. His panic rose, only to freeze in abject horror. Was troll soup? No, that wasn't right. Troll soup never went sour or out of date, due to the fact that even germs would wither if trying to eat it. It would never thicken nor turn watery in the sun or rain. It was a primordial ooze, or as close as to one could find it. No known ingredient could dilute its pungent taste. What do you do to Farah? The dark goblin asked curiously. Farah? A fetching name for her. Gaten forced himself to focus on the abomination in Farah's hand. I fed it to the black hole Piggy New had around. It's sort of... well, anyway, the troll soup survived and it came back looking like this, the goblin said gruffly. A black hole pig. What? The cup was pushed to his lips. Last chance, you gnawed piece of chicken bone. Apologize. Or drink, Farah said, thrusting the cup at him. Gaten glared into her deep, dark eyes, getting lost for a moment before snatching the cup and downing it in one gulp. It tasted a lot better than troll soup, actually. Gaten had tasted the foul stuff once as a dare. This was more like a tart apple pie, but mixed with a spicy ginger. It was warm and thick. I overestimated your bar skills, madame, Gaten smirked as he crossed his arms. This drink was hardly, he began, only to pause. Then it hit the back of his throat, and a squeezing pressure of burning hay, followed by dozens of angry rotted onions, tap danced along the voice box before it hit his stomach. He jerked, and to his eyes, his fingers flew off his hand like fireworks, whizzing around the room, which began to melt like soft candy. The goblins all became happy dancing grapes with smiles, and the largest one was thick, juicy, and thick. He stood up, and his leg stepped a mile in front of him, taking years for it to touch down, but time was false. Only grapes existed to Gaten now. He was god of legs and grapes. Gaten was the king of fair play, the company building now a giant magical unicorn with 3 heads that became his steed. He was fair play, the player of grapes. All was good. Gaten was happy. I was expecting more vomit and less this, Farah admitted, as the foolish human turned in circles on the floor, her broom between his legs as he laughed loudly. There was no lights behind the dilated eyes. I'll need to dilute it to 1/10 and see how it fares, she sighed, preparing a cot and fresh water for the fool when he finally came down from whatever asteroid he was on.
It was going to be a long, bad trip back to the ground. She turned to his group, who all bowed, begging about their ignorance on how they were deeply sorry about the actions that they had taken. Well, there were always good things about this. Trisha wondered if Gaten would mock her, demote her if she saw her broken and defeated at the bottom of the pyramid. The dark god of music at the top, silent as he observed her. She had been so close to something, some sort of understanding. But at the last moment she lost it, the glowing golden pulse of nirvana slipping through her fingers, crashing to pieces like Trisha felt now. "Do you eat people?" she asked aloud, wondering how she might die. She would prefer to die to this one than the mouse in the other room. It felt just less embarrassing. "I feed off attention and compliments. You'd put me up 3 sizes, and I do not look good in stretch pants, my dear," the creature said, walking down the pyramid as his many tendrils connecting him to the ceiling moved like the reverse roots of a tree. "I don't understand," she admitted, too tired to play games or angle for answers. "No, you don't, but you will. Soon. Very soon. It'll come to you like a dream, a whisper of the wind. You're going to turn one day and hum a tune. Then it'll all change. Music and soul sometimes need years of journeys to grasp, or just a simple tune on a sunny afternoon. You're close, but not there," the Dark One promised. Did music change you?" she managed to ask. Her vision began to turn black. There was a hearty chuckle from the other being. "Every inch of me. I was devoid of self and meaning. Then a light of my life sang a little tune, and it all changed. Just one little tune. Now, go find your tune," he encouraged, and Trisha tried to answer, but her vision blacked out. In the back of her mind, a half-forgotten song played. It was harsh, a sort of echoing storm inside a drum. Harsh, but intentional, a sort of singing of energy. Not a tune with words, but a tune for the body. It reminded Trisha of those times where the engineering guild messed with new technology, evolving their knowledge of it. Technology knowledge. This music felt like that, a playful use of the phrase. Trisha snorted, and before she fell asleep, she named it with a joke in her heart. Techno. Lord Mushy put the unconscious girl down with most of the foolish Gaten group, the man himself not leaving until Farah could ensure that she didn't permanently harm the man. Being one of the few with legs on the floor, he and the goblins had been dumping the fair play people by the entrance as Hob and Gob carried them out. With all but their clothes taken from them, Mistress Ruli watched from a stool with a piece of wood that she had been whittling into a tiny grave marker for fair play. From the lake room, the sounds of content quacking sounded out, and the last group fled the room, their clothes cut to ribbons, their hair in tatters, and what looked like nicks across their fingers from trying to hide something. Lord Mushy watched them run past, the entire back of the dungeon gear stripped down to reveal their colourful underwear, and not much else. Looking in, Mushy saw that Waddles now had a royal tent made out of fabric that he had liberated from the group. A yawning tent complete with fur cape as a welcome mat. Inside, the same old twigs and feathers made up his nest. "Will the last 2 teams come down?" Rudy called up the stairs cheerfully. No one came down the dungeon steps. "Last chance," Rudy yelled, and the sound of heavy footsteps moving away from the dungeon was quite audible. "Damn right you run," Rudy muttered as she turned to Mushy. "Yo, Mush, how's the bar?" she asked. "Still committing crimes against nature?" Lord Mushy reported dutifully. Rudy patted his arm on the way past. "That's what I like to hear. I cannot wait to try some of the fried catfish, smoked mushroom soup, and more. Why do you taste so delicious, Mush?" she asked as Lord Mushy pondered it. "Because Mother filled us with love and dreams," he concluded. "Your mum is good at filling things. I like that about her," Rudy complimented. Lord Mushy beamed as best he could, not quite getting the comment, but affectionately liking it all the same. Outside, Dio grinned as the people ran back to the town in clear excitement and joy. Delta had done it again. She was even doing haircuts now, it looked like. He turned to Gus and smiled. "It's Argus, not Gus. You should go inside. Delta is awesome," he suggested, pulling at the other boy slightly, moving him a couple feet before the other one dug his heels in. I shouldn't, he protested, and Dio grinned. Gus was a little shy, but Dio knew deep down he had lots of courage, as tough as metal. It'll be fun, Dio promised as Gus left the tracks in the dirt like trenches. The boy finally got leverage and halted their progress. I won't, he said loudly, and Dio winced, his ears sensitive to the sudden change in any other noise but his own. Something that he was going to adapt to surely, but it still was a little sore for now. There was a pause as Dio stared at him with bewilderment. Gus pulled back, looking ashamed as he outburst. Father hasn't given me orders to enter the dungeon, he said quietly. He won't mind, Dio said, confident because his dad was the best and thus all dads had to be as cool as his dad. That was just how it worked. Maybe, but I've worked so hard and long to get this far. To ignore his orders or to, lack thereof would be an insult. It would be throwing his trust in me in his face. I can't do that. Not after everything he's done for me, Gus pleaded, sitting down on the grass, turning his back to the dungeon. Dio sat facing him, a habit he still had from when he read lips. What did he do? Did he arm wrestle a dragon or suplex a hydra? Or maybe he disguised himself as an old woman to rescue you from evil dwarves who wanted to use you as a free maid? He asked curiously, and with no hesitation. Gus sighed and looked a little amused at Dio's question. You just speak with your heart on your sleeve, don't you? He asked dryly. I speak with my mouth. A heart on my sleeve would make it dirty, Dio said factually, arms crossed and sounding serious. Fine. Do you know about the disaster up north involving the Silver Dungeon? Gus asked, twitching at the name like it was an old wound he prodded. An event involving massively developed dungeon that turned corrupted due to an unknown influence. Its corruption resulted in about 12 villages in the upper mountain range being wiped out in one of the world's largest loss of life recorded since the Great Tree turned on the people. Dio reported dutifully. Gus stared, mouth agape. My teacher likes history. He said it's filled with fools and slightly less foolish fools, Dio explained fondly. I see. Well, I was there. I saw the village of Plata go from a peaceful exporter of silver goods to hell, Gus said slowly, his eyes going distant. Plata was the closest village to the dungeon. It basically rose up based off its treasures. The people were happy. I was happy. It was, Then, it was gone one day. Gus went on to the breeze blew through the meadow. The mountain cracked open like an egg, and Silver left the dungeon, followed by tides of deformed, melting nightmares. Some boiled people alive with molten silver. Some became one with the villagers, becoming half-souls. But no matter how hard I moved in any direction, I found people I had seen growing up, people I'd come to know so well. My home was destroyed, Gus whispered, his voice becoming quieter. Dio stared, unsure as how to respond for a moment. Your mum? Dad? He asked uncertainly. Gus didn't speak for a while. I was too young to remember them, really. They were always busy working, and I don't think, we had many memories together. But when I lay there in the cold, weeping and trying to remember how to do anything but scream and weep, my father found me. He picked me out of the snow and wrapped me in his cloak, he said and smiled. He asked my name, and I was so young back then I tried to use big words to impress him. I don't remember my old family name, but he called me Argus, the gentle boy, because I kept crying if he left me alone. He huffed at the memory. Dio smiled now, feeling that Gus really loved his adoptive father. Did you ever go back? Dio asked him. Never. The idea hurts so much it makes me sick inside, Gus admitted as he twirled grass between his fingers. Delta isn't like Silver. She won't hurt you, Dio prodded as Gus shook his head. I'm not afraid of dungeons, not Delta or any other. I've been near others before and I've got over my fear. It's just that if you love someone, you want to make them happy, and I love my dad. I want to be someone he can be proud of. And this, he gestured to Delta's entrance, isn't how I do that, he said with a firm determination. When can you come? I want to have another adventurer with you. Dio whined a little, but batted his eyes excitedly at him. Gus smiled. It was a real smile with his eyes sparkling. When fair play comes in earnest and I get to be the head of the operation thanks to the elders, I'll have a party with you and we can let Delta blow me away. That sound good? Gus held out his hand to Dio. Dio shook it. He couldn't wait for that day to come. End of chapter. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barkey, it's difficult to pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.